excitedly suggested, "After we get married, every year I'll take a trip with my ex to relive old memories." I nodded. "Sounds great." Then I booked a flight and went on a trip to Hawaii with my ex. When I got home, the police were standing at my front door. "After we get married, every year I'll take a trip with my ex to relive old memories." Sarah said it seriously, in front of her friends. For a moment I thought I misheard her, searching for a hint that she was joking. There was none. She said it with the same tone someone might use to talk about adopting a dog or planning a weekend picnic. Everyone at the table went awkwardly silent. One of her friends even coughed into her drink. Sarah didn't notice. She just kept smiling, tapping her glass like she was making some wholesome announcement. Inside I felt disrespected, as if she were testing my patience. But I didn't react the way she expected. I stopped arguing or explaining, and simply booked a solo trip to Hawaii to clear my head. No plans, no schedule. Just time for myself to clear my head and figure out what I was still doing in a relationship where boundaries apparently only applied one way. In Hawaii, something unexpected happened. When I returned home, I was ready to end the relationship on my terms. The police were standing at my front door. Sarah had always insisted she and Chad, her ex-husband, were just friends. They weren't casual friends, daily calls, long meetups, and constant messages. Whenever I questioned her, she dismissed me. "Stop being petty. We dated years ago. I'd still be with him if I wanted." Or, "You need to grow up and trust me." It wasn't jealousy on my part. It was the double standard. If I so much as liked a photo of my female co-worker's dog, she'd ask why I was flirting. Meanwhile, she'd go to brunch with Chad and tell me afterwards like it was a doctor's appointment she forgot to mention. But every time I tried to be reasonable. I convinced myself I was overthinking. I told myself that adults can have friends of the opposite sex, that trust matters, that relationships need breathing room. And for a while, that worked. Or maybe I just trained myself not to comment anymore. Small incidents piled up. Late-night walks, cryptic messages, and excuses about being his safe person. A safe person for her ex, while I was her boyfriend. And whenever I tried to express how it made me feel, she'd give me that tired line. "You're so insecure. Why can't you just be supportive? This is what mature relationships look like." Her version of maturity looked a lot like me shutting up. By the anniversary, we weren't fighting, but we weren't connected. I felt like a bystander in her life while Chad still took up her emotional attention. So when she made that announcement, the trip with my ex every year to relive old memories thing, it wasn't just a bad joke. It was the perfect summary of everything wrong between us. Because she didn't say it quietly to me in private. She said it proudly, loudly, like it was an exciting new tradition we should all celebrate. Her friends' reactions spoke volumes, awkward silence, hesitant sips, and quiet murmurs. But Sarah just smiled, like she was being quirky and progressive, as if any reasonable, emotionally stable man would be delighted at the thought of his future wife vacationing with her ex every year to revisit old memories. Later, she acted as if nothing had happened, asking about dessert and the party. I felt a dull ache of disappointment. When we got home, I finally said, "Do you really think that's normal?" And without missing a beat, she replied, "Yes, and if you had any confidence in yourself, you'd understand." That was the moment I realized she wasn't confused. She genuinely believed her rules, and my rules existed in different universes. She needed freedom. I needed to be controlled. I stopped arguing or explaining. I simply booked a solo trip. A solo trip. In Hawaii, something unexpected happened that changed everything. The night before my flight, Sarah barely reacted when I told her I'd already booked everything. She didn't ask where I was staying, what I planned to do, or even how long I'd be gone. She only said one thing: "Don't expect me to put my life on hold just because you're having a moment." It was cold, but also predictable. At that point, I'd started recognizing a pattern. If something didn't revolve around her needs, she treated it like an inconvenience. So the next morning, I left without any drama. She stayed in the bedroom scrolling on her phone like I was going out for groceries, not flying across the Pacific to reconsider whether our relationship even made sense. On the plane, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Quiet. It was freeing and depressing at the same time. I messaged Sarah that I had landed. She replied hours later with just K, saying more about our relationship than any words could. The first 2 days I stayed alone, walked on the beach and let my mind recover from Sarah's warped boundaries. I didn't flirt with anyone, didn't go out partying, didn't even talk to strangers. I wasn't there to get back at her. I was genuinely trying to figure out what I wanted. By the 3rd day, I realized she probably wouldn't notice if I disappeared entirely, unless it inconvenienced her. That night on the balcony, I realized I was already halfway out of the relationship. But the moment that truly pushed things over the edge came the next afternoon. I'd wandered into a bar near the beach. Nothing wild, just a casual spot with open windows, a local band, and tourists lounging around in sandals. I ordered a beer, looked out at the water, and let myself relax for the first time in a long time. Then I heard someone say my name. Not Mark, but Mark. That specific combination of surprise and recognition you can't fake. I turned around. It was Jessica, my college ex, visiting the same bar with some friends from a group trip. She looked almost the same, just older, more polished, more confident. She laughed in disbelief. "What are the odds?" she said. "Hawaii, this bar, today of all days?" We hugged and caught up like old friends, nothing inappropriate or hidden, just two adults reconnecting briefly. At one point she laughed and said, "We should take a picture. My fiancé's never going to believe I randomly ran into you." I agreed. We took a simple selfie, just two people smiling at the camera, sitting across from each other with a beer on the table. Later, when I was alone back at the hotel, I posted it to my Instagram story with the caption, "Small world. Ran into an old friend in Hawaii. About 20 minutes later, my phone exploded. My phone blew up with messages, calls, and voicemails from Sarah. At first, I ignored them, until I saw the first text. "Are you effing kidding me?" Then, "So this is why you needed a trip alone?" Then, "How long have you been planning this?" Then, "You're disgusting." And call after call after call. She jumped straight into accusations, rage, and victim mode. The same person who expected me to smile, while she took nostalgic vacations with her ex every year. The hypocrisy was laughable. Her final message before I muted my phone was, "I swear to God, Mark, you'll regret doing this to me." I didn't know what that meant at the time, but I would find out soon in the worst way possible. I muted my phone after that last message and decided not to let her meltdown ruin the trip. For once, I wanted a few days where I wasn't walking on eggshells around someone else's insecurities. I turned off notifications, put the phone face down, and went out to explore the island. The next morning, when I checked my phone, I had 47 unread messages from Sarah. Most were variations of, "Answer me," "Pick up the phone," "Stop ignoring me," "I know what you're doing," "I can't believe you'd cheat on me like this," cheating, because I ran into someone I used to date more than a decade ago, because I took a picture, because she saw me happy in a moment that didn't involve her. The irony was almost comedic. Still, I didn't reply. She'd already decided the narrative in her head. By noon, she escalated through text, threatening to come to Hawaii and accusing me of lying. Watching it unfold felt surreal. I closed my phone and went down to the beach. I forced myself to detach from the chaos for a few hours. I swam, relaxed under the sun, walked around, grabbed lunch. Every time I thought, maybe I should respond, I remembered that no matter what explanation I gave, she'd twist it into something toxic. That evening, Jessica and her co-workers were at the same bar again. She waved me over and invited me to join them for a drink. We sat together for maybe 20 minutes. Her fiancé even FaceTimed her at one point, and she introduced me on camera like it was no big deal. Everything about the interaction was transparent and harmless. I didn't stay long. I said goodbye to everyone, we exchanged quick hugs, and I went back to my hotel early to rest for my flight the next morning. Sarah didn't know that, and more importantly, she didn't want to know. My flight home was peaceful. I slept most of the way. I landed, grabbed my bag, and took an Uber home. I was mentally prepared to end things, calmly, adultly, with closure. But the universe wasn't done with the show. When the Uber pulled up to my driveway, the first thing I saw was a police cruiser parked in front of my house. I wondered briefly if something had happened. Then the officer asked, "Are you Mark Turner?" My stomach dropped. "Yes, is something wrong?" The officer looked relieved and said, "Sir, we received a missing person report. Your girlfriend was worried because she hadn't heard from you in several days. She didn't know where you were and wanted to make sure you were safe. I blinked at him. A missing person report. Because I didn't text my girlfriend back while on vacation? The officer gave a subtle, exhausted sigh. I could tell this wasn't the first time he dealt with something like this. She stated you were in emotional distress, that you had a history of depressive episodes, and that traveling alone might trigger self-harm ideation. I almost laughed. I had no history of depression or self-harm. She had invented a fake mental health crisis to justify her panic. I'm fine, I said, showing my boarding passes and hotel reservations. I was on a planned trip to Hawaii. Everything is accounted for. I showed him everything he needed. He nodded, checked my ID, and recorded the confirmation. Thank you, sir. We'll close the report, but you might want to have a serious conversation with your girlfriend. Oh, trust me, I would. The officers left. I stood in my driveway trying to process how far her fear and jealousy had pushed her, not legally dangerous, but emotionally exhausting. She had weaponized the police to regain control of a situation she was losing, and suddenly everything became crystal clear. This wasn't a relationship anymore. This was damage control. I walked up to the front door. It was unlocked, meaning she was inside, pacing, waiting, probably ready with rehearsed accusations. As soon as I opened it, she rushed toward me with wide eyes and dramatic panic, like she was acting out a scene from a movie. "Mark, oh my God, are you okay? I thought—" I walked right past her. "Save it," I said. "We'll talk once I put my suitcase down." She followed me like a shadow, talking fast, trying to explain why she had no choice, how she wasn't sure if I was alive, and how it was all my fault for not responding. In that moment, I realized there was no twist left to uncover. Her behavior, not the coincidence in Hawaii, was the real turning point. Because nothing says we're done, like realizing your partner trusts their imagination more than they trust you. I put my suitcase down in the hallway and took a breath. Sarah continued speaking in a panicked, frantic way, staying close as if she couldn't let me out of sight. "Mark, you don't understand," she said. "You went silent for hours. I didn't know if you were safe. You thought I was dead because I didn't text you back?" I cut in. She froze. For the first time since I walked in, she stopped talking. "That's not what I meant," she said quickly. "It wasn't just that. It was the picture with your ex. You blindsided me. You embarrassed me. You made me look stupid." I laughed, not out of cruelty but disbelief. "Made you look stupid?" "Sarah, you announced in front of a table of people that you wanted yearly nostalgia trips with your ex, to relive old memories." I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I didn't even insult you. I just said, "Sounds great," and walked away. "So please explain to me how this picture, a coincidence, makes you look stupid." She crossed her arms defensively. "That's different." "Exactly," I said. "Different because it's you. Different because your rules only apply one way." She opened her mouth, but I kept going. "You decided your history with Chad was harmless. You decided your meetups were fine. You decided your emotional connection with him wasn't an issue. And every time I asked for clarity, you'd call me insecure, petty, immature. That's not fair. But when I run into someone from my past, literally by accident, you report me missing to the police? You assume I'm cheating? You accuse me of planning it ahead of time? Do you hear yourself?" She looked away, but I wasn't finished. "You told the police I might hurt myself. You used my name in a false report. You made officers waste their time because you couldn't handle not controlling the situation. You didn't do that because you cared. You did it because you panicked that the world didn't revolve around you for a few hours." Her lower lip trembled, not from guilt, from frustration. "You don't love me," she whispered. "If you loved me, you would have reassured me. You would have explained. You would have—" I shook my head. "No, if you loved me, you would have trusted me. You would have respected boundaries. You would have recognized how suffocating your behavior has become. You would have understood that relationships aren't supposed to feel like walking through a minefield." She stepped closer, trying to grab my hand, but I gently pulled away. "Sarah, listen carefully," I said. "You don't need a boyfriend. You need obedience. You need someone who exists to soothe your insecurity at all times. That's not a relationship. That's a hostage situation." Her eyes widened. "That's cruel." "No," I replied softly. "What you did was cruel. This is honesty." After I spoke, a heavy silence settled between us. I walked to the bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out her suitcase. I set it on the bed. "Pack your things," I said. She stared at me, stunned. "You're kicking me out?" "I'm ending a relationship that stopped being healthy a long time ago. This isn't punishment, this is release for both of us." She shook her head violently. No, you don't get to throw this away because of one mistake. We can fix this. I'll delete Chad. I'll block him. I'll do anything." The desperation in her voice might have mattered weeks ago, maybe even months ago, but now it just felt like too little, too late. "You're not doing that for the relationship," I said. "You're doing it because you're afraid I saw who you really are." I simply repeated, "Pack your things." She hesitated, then packed her things. I walked her to the door. "Is this really it?" she whispered. "Yes," I replied. "This ended when you involved the police over your jealousy." She left without another word. I shut the door behind her with a calm sense of clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in months, the house was quiet, and so was my mind.